What's going on, friends? Harleys have been fuel injected for quite a while now. Now, fuel injection is all well and good when it's actually working. But if you ever do have a problem with it, and even worse, if you have a problem with it on the side of the road, well, in most cases, you're not going to be able to fix it on the side of the road. But the good news is, you can keep your bike, and there's something you can do about your fuel injection, whether you want to upgrade it, or if you just want to get rid of it altogether. Harley began offering fuel injection in 1995 on select Evo models, and they started offering fuel injection with the Magneti Marelli system. Now, for all intents and purposes, it was a decent system, but it does have its shortcomings, and when it worked great, but if you started having problems with it, this thing was a real pain in the butt to get sorted out. Now, the Magneti Marelli system was actually carried over into the twin cam after the Evos up until 2001. Now, after 2001, Harley-Davidson switched over to the Delphi system, which has quite honestly worked very well and been quite reliable. But before we take a look at some of the issues with the fuel injection systems, if you guys would, if you enjoy the video, please give it a like, and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Now, Magneti Marelli systems, these are on quite a few used motorcycles out there. And now, if you're looking at a used bike before 2001, or even a 2001 that has the old mag system on it, you really want to know what you're getting into before you drop some hard-earned money on that bike. Now, as I mentioned, the Magneti Marelli system, it's not really a bad system at all. When it works, and it works very well for what it is. The only thing is when it quits working, this thing can be very temperamental, and the issues can be really hard to chase down. And also, if you have a mag system and it's working fine, best advice I could possibly give you is leave it alone, because you're just asking for trouble if you start messing with it. Now, tuning on the mag system can be a real pain in the butt and just dang near impossible if you're trying to do anything above a stage 1 setup after pipes, air cleaner, and putting a tune on that thing. Now, one of the first problems that you encounter with the mag system when you start trying to do performance upgrades is that it just doesn't provide enough air and fuel to the motorcycle. And if you really start trying to get outside of the stage 1, you're going to find that becomes apparent very quickly. Not only that, parts for the mag system are getting really hard to find, and even the fuel injectors, you can't even really find those things anymore. There's not a lot of aftermarket support for that old system, and just aside from that, trying to find somebody that really knows the ins and outs of that system and can make it work correctly, that can be quite a challenge as well. Now, the mag system has some inherent flaws and issues with it, and one is the idle stepper motor and that really wonky linkage they use on that, which the most common problems that lead from that are the hard starting and just generally trying to get the bike to idle correctly. So one of the other issues with the mag system is that the idle air temperature sensor is actually in the throttle body itself. The idle air temperature sensor is what tells the ECM what temperature the air is coming into the engine. Now, problem being with it being inside the throttle body is it's not very accurate, so the temperature coming in isn't exactly what the idle air temperature is picking up and sending to the ECM to make your fueling adjustments. And not to mention with the throttle body sitting on top of the hot motor, that's only further throwing that temperature reading off. So aside from the idle air temperature sensor being inside the throttle body, you also have the air entering into the throttle body, and it's sitting on top of this hot engine, and as that air enters the throttle body in those dual throats, that air's speeding up, and that's also changing the temperature, and all this is going on behind the idle air temperature sensor, which has already reported the temperature of that air entering to the ECM, which is not the same temperature that it is now going into the engine, if you caught all that. This is going to cause a very poor running engine. It's going to make this thing extremely hard to tune. It's not going to want to idle. It's going to fart. It's going to backfire. It's going to fumble. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. And this could also be better or worse depending on the weather outside that day. As I mentioned, injectors for these things, these are getting really hard to find. There's not a lot of aftermarket support, so you're really left with going out and trying to buy used parts. And of course, we all know in buying used parts, they work perfectly when they came off the donor bike. So with you being left to buy used parts, you buy these used parts hoping that these parts don't have the same issue as the ones on your bike. And kind of as we all know, there is no warranty or returns on used parts. And same thing, it's worse than new electrical parts. you can't even return those things. So if you do have the old mag system on your Harley and you're starting to have some issues with the fuel injection on it, you do have some options rather than just firing the parts cannon filled with a bunch of used parts at it hoping it'll fix it. You can upgrade your bike to the modern Delphi style fuel injection system, or you could just go back and completely convert it over to run on a carburetor again. The simplest way, and unfortunately the more expensive way, is going to be to just convert over with a kit to the Delphi fuel injection system. Now, you can convert over to a carburetor, but this is going to require a lot of wiring, and if you get lucky, you're able to find a donor bike and get the parts of the wiring harness you need and modify and adapt it to fit on your current bike. Now, here in a minute, I'm going to give you a brief rundown on just kind of an outline on what you would need to get and what you need to do to get converted over to a carb. But first, let's take a look at one simple kit for getting rid of the Mag EFI and converting over to the more modern Delphi. Now, probably one of the best kits out on the market is from GixxerFoo. They actually have a Delphi system that allows you to completely replace that mag system, and it also comes with their ThunderMax ECM tuner. So that's another big bonus right there because you're going to get those wideband O2 sensors. Now, the GixxerFoo system also comes with the full complement of all of the fittings and necessary hoses and wiring that you're going to need to completely replace the entire throttle body assembly, the wiring, and even the entire ECM in and of itself. This is going to completely let you retain your original wiring harness while upgrading that old mag system over to a new style Delphi system. This complete replacement system is going to eliminate all those shortcomings associated with the mag system, which this is going to allow you to put big bore kits, cams, really do anything you want to your motor with the reliability and dependability of the Delphi system, and you're not going to have to worry about any fueling or tuning issues. Now, GixxerFoo offers 3 different throttle body sizes. They have a 44, a 51, and a 55 millimeter throttle body. And this is all going to depend on the bore of your engine. So if you have a larger bore engine, you're not going to be looking at the 44, you're going to be looking at the 51 or the 55. But wait, there's more. GixxerFoo is even going to pre-program that ECM for you based on your specifications. So if you already have exhaust, air cleaner, maybe a cam, just let GixxerFoo know and they'll send it out with the proper base map already flashed onto that new ThunderMax ECM. Now, this system isn't cheap. It starts out at about $2 grand for the smallest throttle body and goes all the way up to $2,300 for the largest. And once again, this is all depending on the size of your engine, on which throttle body size you're going to need. It is the most expensive, but it's the most straightforward, comprehensive setup out there on the market today. Now, the other option is just straight up doing away with all that and converting back to a carburetor. Now, this option can be very tedious, but it can be a lot cheaper if you're very patient and you take the time to shop for all the correct parts. I'll just give you a quick brief rundown on what all is involved in converting to a carburetor. That way you can decide which option will be better for you. And if you guys want to see a little more in depth on how to actually convert over the carburetor, let me know in the comments. So number one, you're going to need to try to source some parts from a donor bike. Obviously a carbed one, preferably around the same year as your bike. A lot of these parts that you're going to need, they're no longer available from Harley-Davidson, but this is mainly just the big hard parts. So this is where you're going to want to get them from the donor bike. And if you shop around, you can get these parts pretty cheap. Now, of course, obviously, you'll probably want to go ahead and have your own carburetor ready to go and already have it rebuilt. That's the whole point of this, is the carburetor. One of the main problems with doing this is you just can't order the carburetor portion of the wiring harness from that same year model of bike anymore. They've been discontinued from Harley-Davidson. But on the flip side of that, you can order a lot of the connectors and some of the other little miscellaneous parts that they are still available from Harley directly. Or you don't even have to order them from Harley. There's plenty of aftermarket companies out there that make these connectors. But I have to stress, if you can find a donor bike to get the portion of the harness that was meant for the carbureted bike that you're going to need for the fuel system, this is the best way to go about it, and this is going to make your job a whole lot easier. So you're definitely going to need a service manual and some wiring schematics that are going to cover both the fuel injected and the carbureted bikes. Because if you're unable to find a donor bike to get the fuel portion of the wiring harness, you're going to have to reconstruct it based on these two schematics between the fuel injected bike and the carb bike, because you are going to reuse tidbits from your original wiring harness on your fuel injected bike. Now, the easy part is the mechanical part of removing the old throttle body, the old mag system, pulling the guts out of the tank, putting you an adapter in for a petcock, getting the carburetor and the carburetor manifold mounted, getting your cabling put in there. Those are the easy parts. Where it gets really sticky is when you've got to go in and start doing the wiring. This is where that, if you can get that donor bike, which I hope you can, that's where the easy part comes in. If not, we're going to be going back and forth between the two schematics, looking at your current fuel injection wiring harness, pulling the wires out we don't need, and connecting the ones from the carbureted wiring harness that need to be in the proper spots based on the wiring schematics. Now, if you're having to recreate a wiring harness for the carbureted motorcycle to go on your fuel injected motorcycle, this is where your wiring skills come in. You want to pay close attention to these wiring schematics and make sure that with all the different connectors you had to get, you get the right color wire in the right pin in the right connector so that everything goes back together, all your gauges work, all your other electronics on the bike work, as well as your engine is still going to run, it's still going to fire, and it's still going to operate like normal. You're also going to need to source your own single fire ignition. This is what your newly constructed wiring harness is going to connect to. So you can go to the aftermarket and get you a single fire ignition and hook up all your wiring to that and then get it set up and tuned in properly for your motorcycle. Or you could, if you're lucky, you could find one that's actually from a carbureted bike, which this will make the job a lot easier because you'll just be able to plug right into it. So if you have a mag system or you have a Delphi system and you just hate fuel injection in general, converting back to a carburetor is an option for you out there. Is it easy to convert to a carburetor? Yes and no. If you get all the correct parts together in one place and you have some wiring skills and you can follow a wiring schematic, it'll be a breeze. Otherwise, it may just be easier to take your bike to an independent shop, tell them what you want to do, and then let them do the conversion for you. Either which way you go, make sure you do it carefully and you make sure you do all of this wiring and everything, make it as clean as possible. Because the absolute last thing you want is to take a trip on your motorcycle, break down, and you have to roll into some other independent shop where you don't know them and they don't know you, and the first thing they do is look at your bike, and I guarantee you they're going to focus on this big rat's nest of wires that look like it's been Frankenstein together in there, and they're just going to say, nope, not touching it. But if you're lucky and they're good people, you know, maybe from out of town, they'll go ahead and try and sort it out for you. So guys, if you have any experience with the Magneti Marelli system, or if you've converted your fuel-injected bike back over to a carburetor, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your story about what you did and how it's worked out for you. Anyhow, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. I appreciate you watching, and as I mentioned, if you guys would like to see a little bit more in-depth on how to convert over to a carburetor, let me know in the comments. And please don't forget to like the video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. But anyhow, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. I really appreciate y'all watching. The support here lately has just been amazing, and I want to thank you all for it. But anyhow, guys, until next week, please stay safe on the streets, dodge the cars, ride safe, and I'll catch you guys back here next week. Thanks for watching.